learning. Hopefully we'll have time for a quick gamification demo in the system, and then we'll look at gamification with Jam, the social collaboration tool that we use within SuccessFactors. Okay, so first and foremost, what is gamification? So when we think of gamification, we tend to think, obviously, of different types of games. And it's really important to kind of quash this notion, because it's really so much more than playing games, so much so that it's really not playing games at all. What it actually is doing, it's leveraging a lot of the gamification elements, so elements we find within any type of game, and applies them to non-game applications. And ultimately, gamification is used as a means of motivation. So we want to deploy in any type of organization because we're wanting to boost the motivation within our employees. And what we're doing is we're moving from a sort of archaic and traditional view of motivation with, this carrot and stick philosophy, and moving to a much more sort of intriguing pathway for motivation. And with that motivation comes engagement. So hopefully through that motivation that you're sort of deploying to your users, they're becoming a lot more engaged with the activity in which you're actually gamifying. And it's through that utilization of those different mechanics and elements of gamification that actually boosts this motivation and engagement for your employees. So if we have a quick look now at what actually comprises some of those different gamification elements. So again, when we think of any type of game, whether it be a video game or a board game, we always have a structure or a rule set, a rule book that we have to abide by to give general guidelines for users engaging with the activity, to know what their boundaries and limitations are when they're actually going through and interacting with the application. So we also have this element of challenge. So with any type of game that we engage in, there's always a sense of challenge and mission that we have to kind of navigate our way through, and there are objectives to meet and obstacles to overcome, and that intrigues us into the game further. So we can see how these elements are building this motivating and engaging technology. And with that challenge, we have points. So when we navigate our way through any type of gamified activity, we're actually starting to accrue points based on sort of how well we're doing, and it gives us sort of a direct insight into sort of our progress levels as well. And when we get a sufficient amount of points, we can actually move on to next levels. So you can see in the screenshot here, this is the very famous Candy Crush application. We've all probably had a go on it from time to time, and you can see how the actual achievement of one level to the next is really sort of encouraged, and you feel you've really achieved something when you've actually managed to push past those certain levels. And when you reach a certain status or level, you can see how well you've actually done within the leaderboard. So this leaderboard notion gives you a good sense of how well you've done comparative to your immediate peers. So that can be either facilitated through a mobile or video where you can see where you're placed in the leaderboard, or it can be even on a board game where you can see where your specific counter is in comparison to others. And again, that notion of the leaderboard is really tapping and boosting that element of competition within users. And lastly, we have badges. So with that competition, we obviously will get to an end point. There's always an end goal within any type of game, and we actually can get rewards for that. And that's where badges come into play. So this is quite prolific within gamification. And the rewards give us a really good insight into how well you actually performed within a specific game. So you can see in the screenshot here, you can actually define it by the kind of level of how progressed you are within the certain application. And it's giving such a deeper insight into your progress than sort of we've ever seen before. So those are the fundamental elements of gamification. And I just wanted to sort of highlight and distinguish between two types of gamification in the industry, just so we know that we're all on the same page regarding the SuccessFactors gamification. So we have one known as content gamification. And what that essentially is altering the content that you push out to your users and to make that essentially more game-like. So that's when you're taking, for example, your instructor-led courses or your e-learning courses, and you're actively changing the material in that to actually represent these kind of gamification elements. And those specific elements can either be that element of challenge. You can sort of weave a story within the content. You can create characters, and you can create missions. So that's when, again, you're just manipulating that content to become more game-like. In contrast to that, we have a gamification type known as structural gamification, and this is where I want to highlight, this is what SuccessFactors LMS will be receiving with this integration. So structural gamification is actually propelling learners through material or courses they're engaging in, but you're not actually altering any of the content you're pushing out to them. You're placing gamification elements on the platform in which you push out that content. So really important to highlight that. With the gamification integration with SuccessFactors, you'll be receiving things such as points, badges, and leaderboards. So this will be placed within the platform, so within your LMS, and then your content wouldn't be adjusted or changed in any way. So what does some of the research indicate about gamification as a whole? Why do we even want to actually think about gamification within our organization? So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can actually see some of the elements that I explored earlier in terms of the gamification elements. So you've got points, levels, challenges, leaderboards, virtual goods. And on the right-hand side of the screen, these are some of our fundamental human desires. So things that are fundamental within us all that can actually act as really good motivators for us. And they include a need for status, a need for reward, a competitive environment, being altruistic, having self-expression, and a need for achievement. And what the research has actually indicated is that a lot of the elements that we've seen within gamification can actually tap into those fundamental human desires. So, for example, we have points. So we're accruing points when we're navigating through a game, and that is immediately tapping into our need and sense of reward. Similarly with our levels, so when we achieve a certain point, so we're in level 10, that's giving us that's tapping into that sense of status that we need to sort of understand how far away we've actually progressed and where we can go to next. And lastly, we can see that with challenge. So the challenge that is evoked with any type of game you engage in is going to immediately tap into that competitive nature that you can see, because the games are usually, done with a number of different people. So it's tapping into that element of competitiveness that we all like as fundamental humans. So the baseline message here is that gamification is used to address and satisfy those basic human drives. They are fundamental within us all, and that's why gamification works so well. Okay, and taking a quick step back now and looking at the context of gamification, so where we've come from and where we're going. So the industry interest. About sort of 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of interest in gamification as a whole. We would hear the word game and people would be instantly turned off because they didn't think it was particularly productive to implement within their organization, and social collaboration really wasn't viewed as beneficial in any way. But I think we can all agree, as I mentioned earlier, that gamification is really one of those hot topics right now, and the reality of the workforce is that we're working with a number of different millennials and digital natives which have a very good sort of insight into technology, and it needs to be kind of tailored towards this specific workforce that we're dealing with now. Again, with that current working climate, we're seeing that there's a number of sort of epidemics in terms of engagement. So we're actually seeing a workforce that can sometimes be quite easily distracted. Engagement levels are down. So we're needing some means to recapture the attention and get them excited and engaged within the company and their role. So a good quote we've seen from Gartner here is that only 29% of employees are engaged at work, with 52% identifying as unengaged and 19% as disengaged. So, as I said, we need to a need and means to recapture and re-engage those users. And gamification has proven to be a really, really good means of actually doing that. And lastly, the demands. I think we can all probably agree that employees these days need much more from their employers than they've ever really seen before. And there was some research that I was doing when I was creating this webinar that indicated that if you can help your employees enjoy what they do just even a little bit, you as an employee are really going to reap the rewards. And again, gamification can really help sort of clarify that and get that working within your organization. Okay, so moving on to why we would use it. So we've seen a number of different positive effects that can come about from the use of gamification within organizations. And I will just run through some of those now. So firstly, the excitement and fun that is evoked through a gamified application. So people in general really do enjoy any game-like application. So you're instantly piquing their interest and their curiosity with an actual game-like application, and you're going to get good user satisfaction in simply just deploying something that's game-like. The actual user activity has been shown to be boosted tenfold in terms of users actually going into the system, completing courses, and taking better ownership of their learning. So a lot of more voluntary sort of access into the system has been found when you're actually implementing gamification. So there's better sort of empowerment over users' learning with the use of gamification. The social interaction. So the fact that you are competing with your peers is tapping in and boosting that element of competition between everyone. And that competition has actually been shown to be worthwhile online, but it can also be sort of extrapolated out of the online world, and is going to be facilitating better social communications within companies. The sense of achievement. So the fact that we receive these badges in gamification and giving us a really good insight into our progress is actually giving us a much better sense of achievement than it's ever done before. So as I mentioned earlier about the pass and fail, it's much more granular. You get a very, very good snapshot of how well you've actually progressed and achieved within a certain course. And that gives, again, users much more sort of confidence and sort of trust within the application they're working with. This is a particularly interesting one of knowledge recall. So the ability to actually retain information for gamified content has been shown to be very profound, which we'll see on the next slide in a bit more detail. But the fact that users can actually retain more information, so actual content they're consuming can be retained better than material that is not gamified, has been shown to be being really, really effective. So I think that's a really important one to sort of take home. And lastly, the enduring nature of gamification. There can sometimes be a misconception around gamification insofar that it's a passing trend or just a fad. But it's really important, again, to kind of quash that notion and hammer home the message that gamification is really sort of long-lasting. The fact that you are able to consistently change your gamification strategy will constantly make your users much more intrigued for their own learning pathway. And collectively, those elements together will motivate employees, it will engage employees, and ultimately that will give you organizational gains such as employee retention rates as well. And looking at quite a popular learning framework for learning, what this framework is actually indicating is that people essentially remember less of what they read and more of what they do. So in the doing part, we can see that that is the simulations and the games. So it's tapping into that active participation within material, which is making them remember much more of that rather than just blithely reading through a document, for example. So we can see the sheer impact that gamified content can actually have. Okay, so where do we actually see gamification in the in society? We can see it within frequent flyer miles. So for those that are unfamiliar with frequent flyer miles, what essentially this allows is airlines to give you a certain credit, which is known as miles, if you continue and sort of buy a number of flights with a certain airline company. And those miles, once they're accrued to a certain level, can get you money off your next flight with that specific airline. So we can sort of instantaneously see here that we are, as consumers and customers of a specific airline, becoming rewarded for our loyalty towards a specific airline. And this is tapping into just one aspect of gamification. So that's the element of reward. So because we are loyal to this airline, we are getting rewarded with essentially money off for the next flight. And it's actually really powerful. It's obviously only using one of those elements of gamification, but it's shown to be obviously a very powerful incentive within a number of different airlines. And this kind of follows through for any other type of cashback incentive. So when we have loyalty cards with certain supermarkets or coffee shops, they're again endorsing that same notion of rewarding you for your loyalty to that specific retailer. So while we have the frequent flyer miles, a really good example of gamification in the industry is activity trackers. So again, this is probably something that we've seen much more in the last sort of two or 3 years, and the reason these are so effective for a number of different consumers is because it taps into pretty much all of the gamification elements. It's giving us the sense of reward, it's giving us personal best, it's giving us statuses, it's giving levels, it's giving us challenges to meet, it gives us notification of our goals. So it's collectively using all of those different types of gamification and manages to really engage users into the activity tracker itself, which in turn will give them much more engagement within their fitness levels. So again, we're seeing how gamification collectively really works quite powerfully. And my last example of gamification within different industries is our SuccessFactors community. So you're all probably aware about SuccessFactors community, but for those who don't, essentially the community is a place for SuccessFactors customers to go in and post ideas, queries, issues, etc., which then partners can go in and sort of solution, give them help with, and just give them guidance with, using the SuccessFactors product. And we have 3 different elements of gamification at play within this community. So for example, in the screenshot here, you can see an idea has been posted within the community, and you can see that 20 people have kudos it, which essentially means they've liked the post, and they're always giving them points for this particular idea. And more points for an idea post will actually boost that idea's visibility within the community, which gives a greater chance for SuccessFactors to be aware of it and potentially actually implement the idea within the product. We also have levels and status to achieve. So, for example, my name is obviously Kristen Adams, and I am active in the community. I'm currently at advocate level. If I post a number of more posts and solutions, my status will actually be promoted to expert. So you can see how the sort of level and status is tapped into here within the community, because if you're regarded as an expert, people might be more inclined to listen to your advice, etc. So we're seeing that ability to engage partners into actually really interacting with the community. And lastly, we have leaderboards. So top kudos authors. So this is indicating how many kudos has a particular author received, and that again is going to boost that sort of challenge and competition within us to want to compete to the top level. And so you can see how these different elements are really coming into play within SuccessFactors in general. So how does gamification work? So looking at gamification as the new feature that was supported back in 1508, we are now setting up a partner, and we have our gamification service, which is Bunchable. Really important to note that it's not obviously a turn-on functionality in the system, and you just don't leave it. You need to set up a license with this third-party provider, and that will be bunchable. And how it works is we will set the necessary configurations within the LMS. And once we've set up our integration, we've set our settings in the LMS, we can then start interacting between the two different systems. So an LMS event actually occurs. It can be, for example, completing a course. Bunchable. And based on course-specific gamification strategy, bunchable will then feed back into the LMS the user achievement. So, for example, I completed one course in the LMS, that feeds into bunchable. Bunchable processes that as a particular badge that you have defined. That badge is then fed back into the LMS, and that is then displayed on your gamification profile. And just to give you a quick idea of bunchable, so this is the only gamification provider that we as SuccessFactors are partnering with. And they are renowned for being the provider of online gamification solutions. Sure that you're in very capable hands of the gamification experts. And they work with a number of sort of blue chip organizations. And for more information, you can obviously go to their website and see some of their great case study and scenarios that they've actually implemented gamification in. So again, just to give you an idea of how it works from an integration with LMS perspective. Again, we have an integration with gamification, bunchable. We then configure the events to be published, so that can be completing a course, rating a course, for example. And then you define the points for a specific learning activity. So you can either define points on a global level, or you can go into specific courses or programs in the system and define it on that level itself. Then you would go into the Bunchable admin console and define your gamification rules. So Bunchable will identify you as the gamification admin, and you will go in and create your challenge strategy and your gamification strategy to be pushed out to the company. Again, the LMS publishes that event to the service, so completing the course is published to Bunchable. And then the events are fed back and the achievements obtained are processed and then displayed in the LMS. And these are just some of the different events that is currently tracked within the LMS. So we have completion of a course or curriculum, enrollment, launch, rate, or share. And so currently the gamification support in the LMS is the item level, program level, and the quick guide level. Okay, so I want to do a quick system demonstration just to give you an idea of what that would look like in the system. Okay, so I'm in my learning page, home profile page, excuse me, and I can see a new tile that has been added, and that is called Achievements. And essentially, Achievements holds the entire integration between the LMS and Bunchable. So that is going to be your main focus tile, where you're thinking about that integration between Bunchable and SuccessFactors. And upon clicking that link, or the link in the tile, you'll actually see your gamification profile. So a new sort of interface will appear, and it gives you sort of three main areas to kind of look at. So you have your profile of the person, the points you've achieved, what status you're actually at, and it gives you a kind of progress bar to see how far you are to get to the next level. Your badges would be displayed here. So again, this would be based on your specific configuration within Bunchable console. You also have a leaderboard, so that would indicate how well you've done in comparison to other people. This specific feature can be switched off if it's not something that your organisation really endorses. And we also have achievements. So I can go into my achievements, and these are all custom notifications essentially in your Bunchable console, which you can write the right terminology relevant to your organisation. So you can see your achievements, what you've done, your leaderboard, and your badges. And just to go back to my slides, just to see it from a more sort of populated experience, you can see a number of different badges that can be displayed here with the correct terminology, with the right image, and you can obviously see again the achievements that are shown. So again, just reinforcing that point of that this SuccessFactors learning is receiving the structural elements of gamification. It's not touching some of these key components on the platform in which you push out that learning. Okay, so I've mentioned the Bunchball admin console a few times. This is just to give you an insight into what the actual interface would look like for your identified gamification admins. So it's a really intuitive interface where you essentially map out different challenges for your users. So you obviously have an about page, a who, rules, and rewards. So you can take each tab in turn and follow through the sort of navigation steps. You create your challenge, you set a rule set, and you define the rewards that they will receive upon completing that specific challenge. The who section for now is something that the LMS is not currently supporting, but for the roadmap it's going to be more granular on who you actually push out specific challenges to. And also important to note, once you're set up with Bunchball and you're identified as that specific admin, you can go through a Bunchball University, which is essentially a training of how to actually manage and sort of maintain this particular console for gamification going forward. We also have Bunchball Analytics. So currently the LMS doesn't support any out-of-the-box gamification reports. Your analytics will be coming from, again, the Bunchball console. And we have about 7 to 8 different default reports that can be generated. And what's really helpful about these is there's a drill down capability, so you can get very granular data and feedback from your gamification strategy. And again, it's reinforcing this point about the enduring nature of gamification. So you can actually go into a particular report and see that a particular challenge you've set out, users have completed really quickly or really efficiently, and is perhaps not as challenging as you'd like. So you can therefore go in and actually change some of your strategies to make it much more challenging for some users. Alternatively, some levels may be really hard for some users and they're stuck and they can't progress on to the next. So you think about maybe making it less challenging. So it's really good about changing and manipulating your gamification strategy relevant for your organization. Okay, now we're going to have a look at the Jam integration. So Bunchball also integrates with Jam, the social collaboration tool with SuccessFactors. It's important to note that Jam and the LMS are separate entities for now. Obviously, we know there is an integration between the two, but that again is going to be something on the roadmap for SuccessFactors, to integrate the LMS and Jam together to make it a bit more seamless. But we can see how Bunchball has this tab of Jam. So originally where we find our kudos, we now have the badges earned and the current challenges as well as the leaderboard. And an important note to highlight here is the current challenges. This is something that we're not seeing currently in our learning management profile page, because obviously some users want to know different challenges that they could partake in, and if they completed this course, what would that give them? This is going to be again something on the roadmap for SuccessFactors and Bunchball, where we're going to get that integration to actually see different challenges for users to actually involve themselves in. And we have a number of different integrations that Bunchball can sort of link with. So any type of system or product that can actually reference an API, Bunchball can actually integrate with them. So we're seeing, the expansive nature and far-reaching nature of Bunchball gamification. So it can connect with performance management, content creation, and ideation applications. So these are some of the kind of products and systems that Bunchball have already successfully integrated with as well. Okay, so now looking at the suggestion for implementation. So if you're sufficiently sold by gamification, what are the next steps you would do to make sure you had deployed a really effective gamification strategy? So first and foremost, it's really important to highlight that gamification is only a wrapper. What that essentially means is that gamification can't go in and transform sort of inferior material or platforms. It's only going to apply some of these very strong elements, but it doesn't actually transform pre-existing sort of subpar material. It's going to enhance already solid and substantial platforms or content, but it's not going to magically make something better when it's originally not up to sort of standard. Really important to highlight, it's not a launch and leave. So as I've pointed out, it's obviously not a case of just turning it on in the system and expecting it to kind of flourish. You need to invest the certain amount of time and make sure you have the right number of resources available, and you make a really strong sort of plan and strategy in which to sort of deploy your gamification. There's a bit of research that has indicated that planned gamification strategies will actually lead to employee alienation. So it's really important to know if you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you should not deploy gamification until you're completely sure you have everything at hand and you have the time, resources, etc. And with that plan, you need to strongly identify some of your business goals. So obviously there are general goals such as increasing engagement, increasing satisfaction, but what are some of your company-specific goals? What are you trying to really establish? Maybe it's worthwhile going to your actual employees and asking them what do they want from the system, what is not being currently met. And then you can, put that part and parcel of your gamification strategy, and then you can actually really effectively measure your return on investment for that. Just a note to enforce about competition. So as we've explored through the different elements of gamification, competition is quite prevalent. And while this works quite effectively for the majority of people, there are some people who have a preference, that don't find gamification competition encouraging at all. So you need to account for that, and that could be personal preference, it could be culture, it could be any type of reason why competition is perhaps not encouraging for users. So you need to think about how you are accommodating, putting in place, how are you consistently enforcing a positive atmosphere within the company. So it's just things to be aware of, that some, obviously they work for the majority, but there are some individuals that have a sort of reverse effect on. So just something to be mindful of. So introductory courses for the concepts of gamification. And because gamification is perhaps somewhat a new sort of deployment strategy for your organization, there may be sort of a resistance to kind of getting involved in gamification. So some users may find it threatening, they don't really want to sort of engage with it. So how are you going to ease them in? This can be done with sort of introductory courses, just giving them an idea, snapshot of what gamification essentially is. So it can just be, something like my webinar, for example, just giving you a very high-level overview of what you're trying to achieve and what we're trying to, make better for your actual employees. And lastly, once you feel like you've created this strong gamification strategy, it's really important to kind of roll that out to a tight focus group, to a different number of sort of demographics, to get meaningful feedback and to really refine your gamification strategy. So what elements have worked well, what needs to be sort of enhanced, and that's going to be really helpful in getting that really kind of crisp and finalized successful gamification strategy. Okay, I just wanted to end on a gamification example. So where Bunchable have actually gone into a specific learning management system and done a very similar integration with the platform that they're doing with SuccessFactors. So Nationwide used Bunchable to sort of deal with a sort of engagement epidemic that they had currently experienced. So they wanted users to get much more involved with their learning, to be much more excited about it, so they enlisted Bunchable's help. So their goal was to create a unique, engaging experience. So as I said, they wanted to recapture that engagement so they would become a bit more involved within their learning. They wanted to raise user satisfaction, so general enjoyment of their learning. They wanted to really boost that within their learning management system. And lastly, they wanted to increase that voluntary learning. So, as I mentioned, more about autonomy for your users, and feeling more empowered about their own learning. And this is a solution of what that looked like within their learning management system, so not SuccessFactors, but you can see how a lot of the elements have been quite seamlessly integrated within their system with badges, missions, leaderboards, etc. And what the results were user response were overwhelmingly positive. So one of their key goals was obviously to boost that user satisfaction, and that had been achieved with overwhelming sort of positive results. They found that 97% of employees had actually logged in to take a class. So again, we were seeing that ability to actually really boost that element of voluntary learning, where they actually feel compelled to go into the system because they want to, rather than feeling obliged in any way. And lastly, the test scores had improved. So as I mentioned about that knowledge recall from earlier, the actual use of these elements at the platform level had actually boosted that ability to retain information better. So I think that's really a really powerful one there, with the actual agility of the content that you're actually consuming. Okay, so that is the end of my webinar. I don't know if we've managed to answer all the questions in the chat.
Thank you, Kristen. So once again, if you have any questions, then please put them into the chat window, and we'll answer them, go through those. Additionally, I'd also like to thank everyone, and we will be sending you a link to a very short survey, and we'll really appreciate if you can take the time to give us some feedback. Helps us improve these webinars for the future, and also if you have any ideas for future webinar topics, then we'll be happy to look at those as well. Okay, give it 5 more minutes. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to take them. Otherwise, thanks everyone. Thank you.